The information found in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hi, and welcome to the Women in Depth podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lourdes Viado. Join me as we explore the inner lives of women, their struggles, fears, hopes, and dreams. We'll go beneath the surface and take a deeper look at what is hidden, unknown, uncertain, and uncomfortable. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I am really excited about our guests. They are the co-authors of the book, Moon Mother, Moon Daughter, Myths and Rituals that Celebrate a Girl's Coming of Age. And this book really touched me because I feel that the mother-daughter relationship is so important, and yet it's also fraught with so many challenges. And there is so much that I think as a woman looking backwards now that I wish my mother could have shared with me, important life lessons and experiences that would have really been helpful as I move forward on this journey. And Janet, Lucy, and Terri Allison have put together this book that really addresses key components, key aspects of a woman's experience that are so helpful for a young woman to know about. And they do this with the mother guiding the daughter. And so I just felt like this book was something that every woman should read, regardless of whether or not she's a mom. And even if you're a mom who perhaps is now looking back and thinking, I wish I could have done that differently, or I never had that experience. How can I share this with my daughter? This book will still benefit you. I think that at any age, at any place in life, a woman will be greatly blessed and her life enhanced because of this book. So I'm going to start off by introducing these two incredible women. And I'm going to start off with Terri Allison. Terri Allison was a founder and executive director of Storyteller Children's Center, an early care and education program for children ages 18 months to 5 and their families. She retired from her position in July 2015 and since then has been working as an early childhood education consultant for Transition House, a shelter for homeless families, the Santa Barbara Unified School District, and other local preschools. In addition to a multi-subject teaching credential, Terri received a postgraduate certificate in infant parent mental health from the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and a postgraduate certificate in reflective practice, consultation, and facilitation. Her co-author and my other guest is Janet Lucy. And Janet is also the author of The Three Sunflowers, an award-winning children's book for all ages, and the new bilingual version, Los Tres Girasoles, or The Three Sunflowers. She has been a contributor to Mothering, Mamalode, Natural Solutions, The Sun, Skirt, and Real Travel magazines. Janet holds a master's degree in counseling psychology from Antioch University and a California Teaching Credential from UC Santa Barbara. She is the founder and director of Women's Creative Network, WCN, in Santa Barbara, California, a consulting business emphasizing intuitive, creative, and professional development through writing. Janet offers individual consulting and counseling, women's weekly writing groups, workshops, and international writing retreats in Mexico, Costa Rica, Peru, and Italy. She has 2 grown daughters who live internationally, and she is grateful that they all live under the same moon. Hello, ladies, and welcome. I'm so glad that we are able to do this, especially as this is our second attempt for just to let our listeners know. And I just think this is so appropriate given that we have Mercury in retrograde. And so here we are revisiting a conversation, a dialogue. And I think this is such a gift and such a treat for me. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Lourdes. And perhaps also auspicious because we're under a new moon today.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So wonderful energy supporting our conversation. I wanted to start off with asking you, what is this book about? Just a general overview, and why is this significant?
It's a great question. Terri, you want to jump in or shall I go for it?
Go for it, and then I will follow you.
Gosh, Lourdes, thank you for asking that question. Let's see. I'm going to start by saying I believe that this book it's a guided journey for mothers and daughters to use together. And it's also a book that Terri and I were able to share so many of our personal experiences with our own daughters throughout. And it's been really quite special to reread it after all these years, because we wrote it quite a while ago at the time that they were all coming of age, and now they're well into young adulthood. So it's really special to have an opportunity to reflect on the book and what our early inspiration was and what the book became. Because the book, of course, anytime you write a book, it's a journey in itself. So what's the book about? It began for us as a call, to use the language of the heroine's journey, to find a resource to guide our daughters through the coming of age years. And we didn't have that. We didn't find that. And so we, based on a lot of the searching that we did, we were able to really see what was missing, and therefore what we wanted to create, which is a spiritually focused guide to coming of age. And we use the moon as a guide and a metaphor throughout the book, and we offer goddess myths in each chapter. So it's a collection of our research and our personal experiences and the myths that we found and activities that we experimented with and were able to put into the book to offer to others. So that's, I guess, in summary, what the book is about. And of course, there's just so much more to it.
One of the things that I was just recently thinking about is we had just read Reviving Ophelia by Mary Pfeiffer. And Pfeiffer, and it was just such a wake-up call about the perils that girls face as they come of age. And so part of the book was a response to that. My daughter is the oldest. She just turned 32, and she came of age early. And so it was really up for me and then Janet as well. So, and then the part about it that we were thinking of is the first line is the book is, what if we looked forward to our daughter's first menstruation the way we look forward to them taking their first steps? And I think that that's what inspired us to make it accessible for moms, girls, anyone that would be interested in it.
Yeah, I think that is so important, especially I think that the beauty of that time when a girl experiences, her first menstruation, it's been lost. I feel that, at least for me growing up, I know that there was a lot of shame, disgust, fear, and it was as if no one really wanted to talk about it. You couldn't even talk to other girls or women about it. It was almost something that you went through privately and were very careful to, make sure nobody knew, and that you did everything you had to do to be clean. And as a young teenager, it was uncomfortable, and you just felt very alone with this process.
Well, it was fascinating to hear stories. And that's, so much of what Terri and I did was collect stories from other women and young women also, and learn about their experiences, their first experiences with menstruation and the messages they received and so on. And so, yes, very much, what you've described, Lourdes, was, a bit of a consensus. And, one of the things we didn't want to do was write a book about a menstruation book. We didn't want it to be solely about menstruation, but certainly menstruation is absolutely significant in the coming of age process. So our challenge, so to speak, was to find a way to really invite our daughters into a positive experience with their first menstruation, and then let that also carry them into the coming of age process.
And I think that this is so beautiful also because you bring into this beautiful book the life cycles of women, the maiden, the mother, the crone, and you write about them in a way that honors them, that these are beautiful stages for a woman to be in, and there are gifts at each stage that we share with other women. And I love also how in this book you bring in the concept of ritual because, I feel that that's something that is so lacking, which makes it difficult also to move between, these life stages and to make these transitions. And so to me, that was really meaningful, the way you brought in the life cycles. And also with every chapter, there was a ritual to honor that goddess, to honor that gift.
When we first were writing the book, and then shortly after, I did several moon groups with young girls. Janet's expertise is more with the mother and mine more with the girls. And it was amazing to watch these girls. Of course, they were tentative at first and their moms were there. But as we, in every week that we did the moon group, the structure was the same. And then just watching them relax into it. And then their wisdom that came through the rituals. I learned more from them than, I could have from their moms or even the things that I brought. And it was really, it's there. We just need to let it provide a space for it to emerge. The essence of each girl came to that circle, and it was incredible.
That was one of the most exciting things. Terri did these sort of test groups, because we were really experimenting with ideas, and we were, largely taking ideas that I had been practicing, and experimenting with women. And then Terri was offering a lot of ideas to the girls, and we didn't really know how that would translate. But as Terri mentioned, what came through them seemed so organic, so natural. Their spirituality was right there. It just needed that container, a really safe container to really express itself. So those moon groups that Terri offered really were the testing ground and the basis for so much of what we learned and then were able to put into the book.
I feel too that when I was reading the book that the two of you did such a wonderful job of selecting the myths and then selecting each quality or each aspect, of a woman's experience. And I was thinking how important these are because as a therapist, I work with women who are disconnected from, I'm just going to mention some of these, their intuition, their bodies, their creativity. They're not able to express themselves. Some may not even know that they don't have a voice. And I also loved the chapter on exploring your dreams. I just felt like you said, this was really a gift to a young woman in connecting with her intuition, her gifts that she has access to, and doing this at a time when she's going to really begin to need them. I thought that was just beautiful, the gifts that you addressed in each chapter.
It was really fun to explore that together and with her daughters. And sometimes it was just a result of things that they needed. You know, like there's a lovely little story about Janet's daughter, Austin, who carries a little stone around in her pocket to remind her to find her voice. And that was a time when all the girls were struggling with being in junior high and trying to figure out who they were in the world. And then she sweetly loses this stone and then realizes she doesn't need it anymore.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch on a few of the chapters because, I mean, they are all so important. I wish we could talk about each one, but, I wanted to address a few of them. And I wanted to ask you if you could share a little bit about why this aspect of a woman's experience is significant and a little bit about the goddess that you connected to.
What we came up with, for each chapter is really an aspect of the divine feminine. And that's what we were looking for, how to illuminate the qualities of the divine feminine, not only to our daughters, but certainly for ourselves. And so that's really what the basis of the book is, and the chapters is these qualities. So as you mentioned, Lourdes, like intuition, creativity, dreaming, speaking from your heart, community, all these qualities and values of the divine feminine are what became the basis for the chapters.
And what else I love about this, you reminded me right now, Janet, is that I love how every chapter leads the young girl back to herself. It's very much her inner process, and I think this is so important, especially with the emphasis so much, on what's on the surface or what's outside of you, which is young girls, junior high, get completely pulled into, and I think that by guiding them through how to access and honor these qualities, I think it's the greatest gift you can give to a young girl as she makes this transition into being a woman.
And, interestingly, at the time that Terri and I were researching and experimenting, exploring, all of these ideas for the book, we were sort of coming of age ourselves. We were coming of age into, a new stage of our lives, but it was a time when we were really just, starting to awaken to a new authenticity of self. And so we were making these discoveries within ourselves and then looking for how we could share them with our daughters in a way that they would understand. And, as Terri mentioned, it was just so fascinating to see how innate it was in them already.
Yeah. Again, this is an incredible book. And I felt even reading it now, and I'm in my, close to late 40s, that it was actually very healing for maybe qualities that were missed or qualities that didn't really get that love and honor. I felt that this could actually be a very healing book for adult women at any stage.
Yeah, one of the things that we really started to see was that, with the moon as our guide and our metaphor, she was really presenting herself to us as a divine mother. And so, over time, we saw too that, this book really, it could be for all women because we're all daughters of the divine mother, of the moon.
So I think I'm going to start with intuition, how this chapter of the book teaches a young girl or helps her to understand and access this very powerful part of herself.
I think that one of the things that happens to young girls is they begin to doubt themselves, because if you look at like a 5 or a 6 year old, they're just going to tell you what they think.
Yeah.
And they're just going to say, and as time goes on, that becomes less and less apparent. And so it really is a time to, especially given the age and then the decisions and choices that girls are going to have to make, it's so important for them to be able to really listen carefully to what their inner self is telling them. So just to kind of name the thoughts that you have, or to have girls actually honor those little voices. It's the second chapter in the book. That's how important we thought it was.
With intuition, like you said, listening to that inner voice and those things that but you can't explain, and learning that and knowing that those have value, that those matter, that this is so significant as they move through their days and make choices. And I totally see, working with adult women where they're afraid to trust that intuition and they're not even sure if that is their intuition, because they just don't know how to even tell if it's something that's their intuition or something else. Is that my fear? Is this? And so to be able to help a young girl to become more comfortable and trusting of this part of herself, I think is invaluable.
Yeah, one of the great things that we had so much fun, because the myth that's in this chapter is Vasilisa, and it's a Russian folktale. It was really fun to kind of look around and find the wisdom of the ages and actually translate that into something that the girls could relate to.
So the next chapter that I wanted to touch on is another one that I think is so important, and it's spending time alone, the gift of solitude, the gift of being in your own divine presence. And there's so much I feel struggle around. It's not good if I'm alone. I can't stand to be alone. I need to be with other people. And especially again at this age, but even as adult women, there's really, I think, again, a lot of misconceptions around, what it means to spend time alone. And I love this because I feel that you need to spend time alone so that you can begin to hear your intuition, so it's like it builds right into that.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, Lourdes. I think those two things really go hand in hand. And at the time that we were writing the book, we were really exploring that concept for ourselves. Spending time alone, solitude, silence, stillness. I mean, those were relatively unfamiliar concepts and not even readily accessible at that stage of our family lives. But that was one of the observations that we were making, is that was the way to access that inner voice. And so it followed that would be the next chapter. Yeah, so it does feel like, those two really do go hand in hand, that spending time alone is the way that we are able to get quiet enough and still enough to hear a true inner voice, our intuitive voice.
And I was one of those people. I was probably 40 before I ever spent a significant time alone. And I didn't even realize it. I had grown up in a family, had roommates, got married, had kids, and then had this opportunity to go off on my own and realize that it was the first time in my life. So you shouldn't have to wait that long.
Well, and so much of it is about permission. It's one of those things we don't often give ourselves permission to do, not to mention the fact that it's just unfamiliar and can therefore be really uncomfortable.
Another chapter I wanted to touch on is the one with the African myth of Oya, and it was about finding your voice. This is a big one because I think, as Terri was describing, for a young child, not only will they make their observations, from their own intuition, but they will just speak it. They will say things in front of, whoever, and they're not concerned about, if they'll be liked, if anyone's feelings will be hurt. It's just, they just speak up, and there's a purity and a confidence and a beauty because they're just expressing themselves. And this gets lost for most women, even beginning to figure out, what is my voice,
And certainly for the girls. And I want to jump back to something that Terri illuminated, which is that one of our primary calls, besides the age and development of our own daughters, one of our primary calls to write the book was based on the book by Mary Pfeiffer, Reviving Ophelia, in which she illuminated all the ways that girls lose their voices and lose connection to their true selves. And so that became really so important. It was such a big focus for us, to bring into the book, because our book was in part a response to Mary Pfeiffer's book. And so, again, you've identified one of the, the chapters that felt so important for the girls: intuition, spending time alone, and finding your voice. I mean, they really do seem to go hand in hand. And most importantly, an authentic voice, an intuitive voice and an authentic voice. That's what we were really intending to guide them toward and support them in trusting.
One of the things that, now that I'm thinking back, and it's been fun to revisit the book and be thinking again about the girls' groups that I ran, but one of the activities, the mother-daughter activities, was making a bracelet or a necklace. And so I would have these beads, and the girls were so thoughtful and intentional about what they chose, the colors that they chose, and then, they could wear it as, a reminder of their own voice. And it was so beautiful to watch them consider even what color their voice might be. And so it was really lovely. And then, throughout the book, then it's so important to, in addition to having your own intuition, but, your own voice in your dreams and in the creativity as we go through the book is, finding your voice and then honoring it. The girls were just incredible.
And all the ways that it's expressed, as Terri was saying, expressed through our dreams, through our creativity, and it just kept rippling out, until their voices were strong enough within their communities.
And then the last chapter that I want to touch on, and again, it was so hard to narrow this down for our conversation, is the one on honoring your body, because I think, wow, we really are in a time right now where there's such a fixation that's not helpful or healthy on a woman's body and her appearance and her value and her worth. And so many young girls, like, 7, 8 years old, are already concerned about being fat or being, I feel sometimes, already very sexualized at a young age. And so this, I think, is a really big deal. And I'm so glad. I think we're in a time right now where honoring, the woman's body in so many ways is a very relevant and meaningful topic.
Yeah, it's such a double-edged sword because, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, women were coming into their bodies. And, we didn't even talk about it. We didn't talk about our bodies. And then there was this wave of showing bodies and honoring bodies. It's so interesting to watch, how mores change and how we go through these cycles. And then right now with social media, everybody can appear perfect and nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
So I think that you're right. It is a really tough time and a very, significant or important topic, and to be continually talking about as girls come of age and as women come of age.
And I feel too that this brings in, beauty for women of all ages and from different backgrounds and cultures and experiences. And I think too, for me, what was also significant is there is preoccupation, at least I feel, at least in the US, and I'm not saying this is the case for everywhere, where there's a focus on youth. And it's almost as if once you become a certain age or perhaps move into another life stage, that you have less value because your appearance is no longer youthful. And so I felt that was also a beautiful part that you could address with this, that it's also the body in terms of as it ages, and its beauty during those times.
I feel like one of the most exciting things that we found in the writing of that chapter was the myth of Gaia. And we were able to make that correlation between the earth and the female body, and all the ways that women's bodies are natural and naturally beautiful, in every shape and contour and size. And that was really what we wanted to focus on, and to illuminate all the ways that we're influenced by the media and advertising. But that was the beauty, really, of having these goddess myths, because we had these ancient archetypes that we could reference, for pretty much every quality or every topic we were exploring. And it also lended itself to some really fun art activities as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've been thinking about as we've been talking is each of these chapters, you could look at each topic as a gift. And so just the gifts of our bodies, to have a moving, working body, and the miracles. I mean, just think about the gift of the miracle of intuition or creativity or our dream life, and then our bodies that function. It's a reframe, I think. It's a looking at it from the idea that the universe and and the goddess and all of us have come together as gifts to each other, and in so many different ways.
Yeah, I love that reframe of the gifts. And I feel too that with women supporting each other, mothers and daughters, in this coming of age process, that it helps a young girl at a very early in her life to become aware of these gifts, even before, perhaps she risks losing them or being disconnected from them. Your book also reminded me of, Clarissa Pinkola Estes' Women Who Run with the Wolves. But I felt like this was a version for moms and their daughters. And I don't know if you're familiar with one of the stories in her book called Sealskin, Soulskin. I'm probably not going to get the whole thing right, but it took place in Alaska with the Native Americans in Alaska. The myth was there was a fisherman, and he saw out in the ocean that there was this rock, and he started to notice that at a certain time of the day, these seals would come up to the rock, and then they would climb on top. They would take off their skins, and they would turn to these beautiful women, and they would dance. He didn't have a wife, and so he decided, I'm going to row my boat out there and see if I can find a wife. So he rowed out there, and he waited for them again to come back, and they were dancing. And while they were dancing, he took one of the seal skins and put it in his boat. And then when the women finished and they transformed back into their sealskins and slipped back into the water, one woman was left and she couldn't find her sealskin. And he told her that she was beautiful, that he would love her, and to please come with him and be his wife. And he said that in 7 years, he would give her back her sealskin and she could return to the ocean. And so she agreed, and she went with him, and they had a son, they created a life, but she noticed as the years went by that her hair was becoming brittle. She couldn't see as well. Her eyes were becoming clouded. Her skin was becoming very dry. Her hearing, she felt like she couldn't hear as well. And when the 7 years came, she asked her husband to give, if she could have her sealskin back. And he became very angry and told her, no, I love you. We have a life. We have a son. How could you leave me? And he refused to give it back to her. And so her son, who by now was, I think is a little bit older, maybe 8 years old or 7 years old, he witnessed this argument between his parents. And one night he went into their barn or whatever that structure was, and he found his mother's sealskin. And he came back and he brought it to her, and she saw it and she put it on, and he looked at her, and he his mother, don't go, but she had to go. And so she went running towards the water and went back into the water, turned back into a seal. And there's a little bit more to the story, but Dr. Estes described it as women at different times in their lives either give away their sealskins or it's taken from them. And then they go through this process of living this life and then realizing that they are no longer able to see or hear or speak, that they're drying up. And one of the important stages of a woman's life is to get her sealskin back. That which, restores her and replenishes her, that which helps her to see, to hear, to speak, which helps her to dance again. And so I felt like, in many ways, your book helps young girls with realizing what their sealskin is And so they are better able to stay connected to it and care for it. And perhaps if and when they do lose that, or they agree to give it to someone, they're better able to notice how that's affecting them and better able to go about getting that back.
That's beautiful, Lourdes. Yeah, and I really appreciate Terri using the word gift about each of these chapters and qualities. And that was so much what we wanted to reflect to our daughters, is that their very female selves is a gift. The fact that they are female is a gift, in a culture that doesn't value the feminine, or devalues the feminine. I think that the story you've just shared really does offer that same metaphor that we were really working with throughout the book.
And I love the idea of, because we all lose our sealskin
yes.
at different times in our lives. And if we have never known it, how could we return to it?
Yeah.
And a couple of moms in the moon groups, the moon groups I did with girls kind of 8 to 11-ish, a little bit older sometimes, but that was kind of the general. And so they were very open and free and things like that. And then when the mom and the daughter separated, which you have to do, but you do it, there was this point of reference that they could go back to when things were really hard, or just remembering the moon group or that time that they did the ritual together or whatever. And then there was this opening for reconnection. And sometimes I think, we have to separate to reconnect in even a stronger way.
Yeah. I love that, that you have a reference point to go back to remember. Yeah. So I wanted to ask each of you if you had a favorite part of the book or a favorite ritual that really touches you in your heart.
Oh, what a good question.
Well, gosh, it's funny because I don't want to speak for Terri, but I feel like there's two really powerful rituals in the book, and they are the bookends, really. The first chapter is a ritual that I offered to my daughters and with another mother and her daughters. And the last ritual in the book is Terri's daughter's coming of age ritual. So I feel a deep connection to that first ritual in the book because it was when I was really trying it out, when I was first trying out the concept of introducing a ritual to my daughters and other young women. And I write about that. I didn't really know how they would take to the language, just to even using the word ritual. And so it was winter solstice, and I was able to make just a slight analogy with the Christmas holiday and how we make wish lists. But this ritual was about a different kind of wish, which is what we do at the new moon and we do at winter solstice. We identify those wishes or dreams, for the lunar cycle or the year. And I was so delighted that they really got it and they were really into it and they supported each other through it. And it just felt like, we're on the right track here.
How about you, Terri?
Well, I love the last chapter because it is my daughter's coming of age ceremony. But the other one that comes to mind is the second to last chapter around community and creating that community and looking at ways that we all come together. And one of the things I've been doing some research and some studying, and one of my teachers talks about in the hunter-gatherer days, there was 4 older adults or teenagers to every young child. And now we've reversed that to where 1 adult to 4 children we think is a wonderful ratio, and how we've lost, or our communities become these social media communities, and how just being in the presence of others and creating a community that surrounds you is so important. So I think that if I had to do a third one, that would be the one on community and how we gather together.
Terri, I think that is so important also in light of the way that our cities, the way that they're structured, the lifestyles. We are so disconnected and believe often that social media can somehow fill that space or that void. And I think that also touches on how women sometimes it's very difficult for us to support each other. We can view each other as competition. There's a cattiness, jealousy, envy. But this chapter, it really addresses how this is a sisterhood. It's a community. We are here to support each other. And I feel that is so important, perhaps even now more so than ever when we live in a very, I think, disconnected world where now, we no longer write letters or we text instead of pick up the phone and actually have a conversation where neighbors don't know their neighbors or ever talk to their neighbors.
I really appreciate you illuminating that, Laura. And I feel like that is one of the things that the moon offers us is the perspective that we are a global sisterhood. We all live under the same moon. We all have the same divine mother. Therefore, we are all sisters wherever we are. And it feels like that's the spirit that perhaps got lost and is also being remembered, more and more being remembered, that we are a global sisterhood. And at every age, we're a sisterhood.
So if there is a mom or a young woman who wants to pick this book up, is this a book that can be used by anyone regardless of religious or spiritual beliefs? Or what are your thoughts around this for maybe someone who's listening to this? And sometimes there are some who might be a little nervous around the idea of goddesses. And so I just want to throw that out there and just to see, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's easy to read and easy to understand. And I think that the stories, although they're intentional, are so universal. And I know that in the book, there's many different rituals. In fact, a friend of mine's daughter talks about her bat mitzvah.
Yeah.
So it can cross cultural and religious lines and blend because of the universal nature. And I would imagine that even some people can find their own stories in their own particular belief system, religion, spirituality that are so similar because the origin of all of these stories is so universal. We found them all across all different cultures, from the Russian to the Inuit, and, so.
Yeah, I love that also. And I think, again, what you said, Janet, about the moon kind of bringing it all together. And this is really an archetypal, universal, global experience of the divine feminine. So my last question, ladies, is you wrote this book several years ago, and now it seems like I think it's having a renewed rebirth. What has been, I guess, what has surprised you in this process, or what has been a gift that you received from writing this book?
I have something I'll say. When we wrote the book, when we conceived of this idea, which was, probably almost 20 years ago, a lot of these concepts were really out there. And we had a pretty probably small initial, not target audience, but audience. And what's been such a really beautiful surprise and a gift is to see how 16 years later from its, first publication in 2002, how widely received, how widely used the book is. And, we hear from people all over the world in English-speaking countries who are using the book. So to find how far it's rippled out and it's become perhaps slightly mainstream has been such an affirmation of so many things that we hoped for when we began.
We actually, I don't know where it is in the process, but got a request from some women in Poland to translate it into Polish.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so even to think of my idea of Poland and for it to have reached that far And one of the things for me is, especially when I was rereading the book again, is I was so struck by how people so willingly shared their stories, and the gift of them opening up and allowing their stories and their words to be in the book. And I was just going, oh yeah, that was, people were just so generous in their time and their stories. It was really fun to revisit that.
So ladies, what is the best way for listeners to get in touch with you, to learn more about your work, or possibly work with you if they are interested in that?
Good question. For me, my email is very simple, terri@moonlitconsulting.org. And I'm happy to explore moon groups with mothers, do some consulting, or actually just guide them to do their own moon group.
Are you still offering moon groups?
I haven't in years, but if someone was interested, absolutely.
And Janet, what's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you?
Well, I have a website, and the address is Janet Lucy Inc., INK. And on my website, you can see the various things that I offer, and my contact information is there. So that's probably the best way to connect with me, is through my website.
And we will put all of your contact information in the show notes also, so that listeners can find you that way also.
Thank you so much, Lourdes.
Thank you for your deep, deep knowing of the book.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Women in Depth podcast. I hope it brings you a deeper understanding of yourself and others, and that you found some insights that illuminated and inspired. You can follow Women in Depth on Facebook and YouTube, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe on iTunes and leave a review. And finally, if you enjoy Women in Depth, please share with a friend. Again, thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.